So this is the physician revenue cycle panel. I don't know, I usually have a hospital revenue cycle panel, so this may be one first inaugural, I guess, physician revenue cycle panel. So I'm happy to be here. We have some great leaders and a great team that's going to share with us. But just kind of want to put some things in perspective. I know we have a lot of partners, business partners, vendors, other organizations, but usually when you're talking about revenue cycle, the first thing that vendors, partners, any hospital organization thinks about is the hospital revenue cycle. Everyone forgets the physician revenue cycle. So yes, we know the hospital revenue cycle has the largest dollar impact, and it has the biggest impact on net patient revenue. It has the biggest impact sometimes on the overall health and wealth of the hospital. But what many people don't think about or prioritize is physician revenue cycle. So physician revenue cycle has the most volume. While it's the smallest dollars, it's believed to be the most impactful to the providers, the patients, and the ability to maintain positive patient experience and care across any organizations. So if you think about it, it's where the patients actually have access to their provider, their care, and most of their questions. So today with this panel of highly strategic, experienced, and talented leaders, we'll share with you how they manage in today's time with all of the additional payer changes, federal changes, and extreme volume that has hit physician revenue cycle at the same time that COVID hit, okay? So we'll start by letting everyone introduce themselves.
Would you like to start with me?
Absolutely.
My name is Gail Scarborough-Ritz. I'm with Ritz Management Services, my own consulting firm, and I am happy to be here today to help.
Hello, I'm Sandra Johnson, and I'm Vice President of Revenue Cycle Operations at Emory Healthcare.
Hey everybody, Adam Gobin, Assistant Vice President of the Medical Group Business Office at Wellstar.
All right. So we have a few questions that we're going to start with, and I would honestly advise that our partners and vendors actually really listen, because you may hear opportunities, as well as other organizations. You may hear some great things that some of the different groups are doing that will help you. So the first question is for Sandra. What 3 factors do you believe largely impact physician denials and underpayments, and what are you doing about it?
Okay. I think the first one is it's just denials. I mean, it's denials, of course, but pre-authorizations and authorizations. It happens in many ways. Some of them are actually because we just didn't get an opportunity to get those, because, like she said, we have thousands and thousands of accounts. And then the other issue sometimes is when they get in, the doctor's in there, he's doing something, now he sees he needs to do something else. So we don't have good feedback loops to get that back to us, so we can actually start the authorization process. And as you know, no one will give you a retro authorization anymore. And so we end up losing those because there's just no authorization there. We have started a process now where we're doing first in, first out. And what it really means is as soon as we get an order for anything, we are automatically putting that into the system and starting the authorization process, regardless of when it's going to actually be happening. That way, we're trying to start them early enough that we know that we're going to get an authorization for anything for which there's a service going to be provided. The other thing we're looking at is how do we get that good feedback loop so that when something gets changed while the person is actually performing the service, that we will know about it, because as long as you actually contact them on that same day, it's not considered a retro. And so we're trying to figure out how do we get that feedback loop so that we actually will get that information and we're able to start that process. The second thing that's really hurting us badly is credentialing. The days of being able, remember how we used to credential a patient, we would just send in every single location that we have, so no matter where our doctor went, we knew that they were going to be covered. They won't let you do that anymore. They have to spend X amount of time at that location in order for you to get them credentialed. So when you switch people around now, and with COVID, it really happened a lot, because sometimes we needed to shift people over somewhere they'd never been before. And you couldn't wait on credentialing to happen because, they may have an abundance of COVID patients and you needed them to go there. And so what we're finding is we end up writing off a lot of those accounts. And so what we've done now is we put it in our managed care contracts that says whenever that person is actually approved by the board as a practicing physician at our facility, that is the date in which we can go back to when we actually get the approval for the credentialing. And so what we do now is we hold those. So while the credentialing is going on, we hold them after they went to the committee. And then once we get the credentialing back, then we release all those claims so that they can go out and be paid. And so that's helped a lot, because now we just have to make sure that nobody schedules them prior to them going to the committee, and they should be scheduled prior to going to the committee. But sometimes it does happen. What I found out, the one loophole that I'm still trying to close is doctors will call them in for a consult on an inpatient, and they haven't went to the committee yet. And so now I end up, having to write those off. So we're still trying to figure out how do we close that loophole there. And then the last thing is payer behavior. We have so many payers that will not pay us, even though they know they should pay you. Right now we have Ambetter. They did something to their system so they don't pick up the right location for a patient, the right location of service. So all of our claims got denied, and they know that their system is not picking it up right. Okay, they're going to correct it, and they're going to reprocess them. That's been 7 months ago. We're still waiting on their reprocessing to take place. We're still waiting on them to do something about it, but that's the biggest issue. We got a lot of payer behavior issues, and as long as they can get away with it, they will continue. So we have brought on an attorney firm. We've contracted with an attorney firm because we're going to start suing. And we're going to take them to court every time they do this, and maybe they will stop doing it if we keep taking them to court enough times. So that's the way we're handling those different things.
Adam or Gail, anything you want to add?
I'd add a couple of things. First of all, the idea of it sometimes isn't just an add-on procedure. As Sandra mentioned, that can happen a lot. And we don't have an authorization for that additional thing you're going to do. We also find out that we authorize something and then they do something entirely different. Yep. That results in a denial. Also, among those of us who work in the provider setting, we know that MDM, medical decision making, is actually up to physicians. Mm-hmm. Payers do not. So payer medical policy creates a lot of physician denials, at least from my experience, simply because the payer sees it one way regardless of how our providers might see it, which leads to a lot of peer-to-peers, which is everything that happens is adding to the cost to collect. If you can't send a clean claim and get paid the first time, it just costs you more. And so everybody, I'm sure all of us, are very dedicated to preventing denials versus figuring out how to appeal them all. You're going to have to do it anyway. So those are a couple of other big things. With regard to the medical policy, we've got a big initiative at the University of Mississippi in Jackson. The big initiative is teach the providers payer policy, whether they would like to learn it or not. They will accept the information and they can get a little disgruntled, and all you have to say is, I'm not trying to tell you how to practice medicine, we're just telling you what they'll pay for. And so that's another area where it takes a lot of education and actually taking them. We do meetings where we bring up the websites of the payers so they know we're not making this up. Here's United, here's Molina, here's Magnolia, here's Cross, whatever it might be, their web portal that shows these policies so that there's not any question as to whether we're just trying to make life more difficult. So that education, I think that physician education is extremely important. And I'm in an academic medical setting, as are you. Mm-hmm. And so you have many physicians who are highly specialized, and they do know things about certain procedures that payers don't. And so getting them engaged with the medical directors at the payers is very important. That's a peer speaking to a peer. And also, if a peer-to-peer happens and it's not with the right kind of physician on the payer side, dispute it. Mm-hmm. Don't let it stand. If they call a family medicine doctor about a psychiatric patient, that isn't right. You've got to talk to somebody who knows that same specialty. So those are just a couple of additional items on that topic.
Absolutely. Adam, anything?
No, good.
Okay. All right. So our next question is, as we're talking about adding providers to our denials and committees and bringing them in and making them aware of policies. So for Gail, what revenue impacts do you believe that physician burnout plays on the revenue cycle?
Well, this is a really interesting question because when we had, she led a wonderful prep meeting, by the way, didn't she?
Yes, she
Great
did.
prep meeting for this panel. And during that prep meeting, we talked about this because I said, well, you know, I'm not sure I know what burnout is doing to our doctors and the revenue cycle. And it was very insightful. Sandra offered some very quick comments, as did others on the call, that I hadn't even thought about. So I have the question, but a lot of what I'm going to say to you actually came from other colleagues on this panel in our discussion at the pre-meeting. The burnout is having of the providers and all of the demands on them for documentation improvement, because documentation improvement leads to better reimbursement. Everybody knows that. So they have a lot of demands on them for documentation that fits nicely with coding. We got a lot of coding education going on with physicians. They're exhausted, and some of them actually, and I think, Sandra, you used this term, some of them seem like they've just given up. They just want to see the patients, and they're not really paying attention to the other administrative things that are so important. And when that stuff slides, we end up with underpayments, denials, inability to support procedures that were done when they call, when the payer says we need a medical record. Guess what? It's inadequate to support what we build, that type of thing. So, and you hope your internal operations are catching all of those kinds of things. But doctors don't like to be queried. Does everybody know what a query is? Okay. So, you know they don't like that. You do that all day long. And I always say to them, well, you think we like to do it? That's my answer. You don't want to get them. Well, we don't want to do them. But we have to, because you're expecting a coder to interpret what was in your head. And so I think what I'm trying to say here is their burnout is often due to the pressures that they're experiencing to be better at a lot of things beyond seeing patients. And when they have to get better and better at things that are beyond actually seeing their patients, it becomes frustrating for them. We have doctors who, quite frankly, refuse to serve. By that I mean serve on various creating value committees or documentation improvement initiatives. Nah, you know, let somebody else do that. And I think a lot of this also has to do with what environment you're in. If you have a lot of employed doctors who get burned out and kind of have the give up syndrome and just don't want to engage in a lot of this stuff, you can typically impact them. You can imagine the ways that you can impact them. You can start talking to them about penalties for failure to deliver on this or that. Depending on your compensation arrangement with them, you can influence their behavior. But a lot of community doctors may not feel quite as obligated to do those things. So a lot of this has to do with your setting as well, your provider setting. So I would say the impact of physician burnout on the revenue cycle is all of the extra background work that needs to get done that doesn't get done, or we can't seem to get our arms around because we just don't have the kind of participation that we need from providers. Now, they want their work RVUs. Don't you think they don't? For every little thing that they do, if that's their comp model. So I'm not saying they don't work. Okay, they work, but they want to work on patients. They don't want to work on this other stuff. And I don't know, we didn't talk about this on the prep call, but was anybody faced with a lot of additional questions, concerns, conversations about when the new E&M coding went into effect?
Yeah.
We're going to audit that. I'm talking to somebody right now about doing a pretty extensive audit on what's happened since that went into place, because we actually should be making more money. Theoretically, with the new coding, we should be making more money. Yes, ma'am.
I audit, I do a lot of that, and what I am experiencing is that they're still documenting those comprehensive You know, those pushing a button that does a, you know, a macro, and I'm complaining about over having to do all this extra documentation. I'm trying to get them to understand, you don't have to do that anymore.
Well,
Document what we need, you could, I press the district president illness and the assessment plan, you know, those are the things where I look for the majority of what I need to.
And what happens is that we done trained them so much to write everything, and now we tell them they don't have to do that anymore.
yeah.
That's the problem.
It's counterintuitive to,
Right.
to their whole history. And in addition to that, the whole time capturing thing, a lot of them don't realize it must be done in that 24 hours. You can't say, oh, well, I'll do that later. Today. If you want us to be able to claim that reimbursement, it has to be done in this 24-hour period. And I would agree with you, they're kind of stuck in their old methods, not realizing you can do less of that, but now we need your start and finish times. That's what matters now. And so for those of you who went into the whole new E&M thing, I do suggest we're about, 10 months into that now. If you aren't going back to look and see what the impact of that was, I would highly recommend that people do that.
I'm glad Gail brought that up, because I don't think we emphasize that 24 hours. We emphasize to do, but I don't think anybody emphasized that they got to get it done in 24 hours. So if you haven't emphasized that, I would suggest you go back and do that. I'm going to go back and do that, because I know we didn't emphasize that at all. So we've got to make sure we emphasize that, because I know we know people are starting to burn out. I started to see missing charges, because a lot of our stuff is based off of them writing something for the charge will come through. So we end up with missing charges, incomplete, a lack of documentation, because they just don't want to write it anymore. And so, like you saying, they did take it down, but they take it down to the point where we can't even justify what they did. And so that's how we kind of know they're starting to burn out. And then also, we've got some compliance risks that happen behind that, because they do start not documenting correctly, and we have to end up giving back a big refund. And so now we definitely are having a conversation at that point.
Well, and you know, if they sniff a problem, they
They
want to do
will.
surgery.
Right.
They smell something funny, they want to
Right.
look at a lot more than
And then
they started
tag
with.
they tag that clinic, and they're going to be back.
So we've heard what keeps Gail and Sandra up at night. So let's ask Adam. Adam, what keeps you up at night, and what new technology are you looking to implement to help solve that problem?
Thanks, Ashley. So I think, first of all, we should all give Ashley Hill some credit for just being ranked the top moderator for the Fall Institute. So everybody give her a clap. It was posted on LinkedIn under my name. So the biggest thing for me is, and Gail mentioned it in part of her conversation, is cost to collect, because I think that drives everything downstream. So cost to collect in general for us, and if anybody knows an ambulatory benchmark, please let me know. We've had Martin Comer, who's somewhere in the room, that has scoured MGMA communities. I think MGMA actually deleted it. HFMA, Epic User Web, we've checked everywhere to find out what the ambulatory cost to collect is for a revenue cycle. Ours at Wellstar, and I'll just throw it out, is 7%. I don't know where that lands. I'll probably talk to Sandra and find out where hers is.
Right on target.
Oh,
for the
good.
industry.
That's good. I still hate that. So,
Well, it's upsetting because
Yeah.
the hospital cost to collect much less.
you got
Much
it. You got
less,
it.
much less.
1 to 2% at maximum. So, cost to collect drives everything, right? And we have to scale as our providers continue to increase and our charges go up year over year. For Wellstar, it's 5 to 8% growth every year. Well, of course, we've got to pad our teams with FTs to be able to handle that growth and do revenue collections. It's just not sustainable anymore, especially in this environment where we're having to spend more money on AR team members, on non-coders than we ever thought, because of the whole vaccine mandate and all kinds of things that makes the market a little more competitive. So it's getting very expensive. So what that means for us, for Ashley and I mainly, is, and for everybody in the room, is that widget management now becomes really important. Now we've really got to figure out how to focus staff on revenue generating work versus none. And we first look at it within our own system. I think the first thing you should do is look at your current system. How can I be optimized to the best of our abilities? We've put in more Q scoring. We've made adjustment codes, for example, more granular, so we can figure out what Gail and Sandra were just talking about. 50% of our pre-cert adjustments are as a result of an add-on or a change in CPT code. 50%. So that means we would need more coders that are actually being able to scrub the schedule to educate the pre-cert folks on this code's missing the last digit, or it should be a 7 versus a 6, or with this transcatheter aortic valve replacement, we should do these 2 other codes and pre-cert them anyway. So we need coding support, but then coders are expensive, as Liz knows. So we need to figure out how to scale, and you can't scale by just purchasing a whole bunch of coders, despite what Liz's S-bar says. So the other thing is obviously automations to get rid of non-revenue generating work, automatic adjustments for bundling and things like that, auto NRP to self-pay if it's non-covered services and things like that. Clean Claims Initiative was something I put down, something that Liz is working on with a group that's actually here today, Wyndham Brandon. We're working on a Clean Claims Initiative together to be able to figure out how we can reduce our charge review rules, which were put in place years ago because folks didn't know coding, but now that we're educating people about how to code better, we can remove some rules that are mandating stops for people to start, clicking and stuff like that. So we're reducing clicks and increasing clean claims, and that's huge. Now, that's the local improvements across other things. There's external improvements that we're looking for through external vendors. So Wellstar's putting out a formal RFP for RPA AI solutions so that we can look across the board to see what the top vendors are offering in terms of the ability to help us from an automation perspective. But the bigger picture is all of this is to help maintain our current staff. If I'm staffed at 204 people as of this morning at 8:30, I want it to stay like that for the next 5 to 10 years. Which means we need to be able to scale from a solution perspective to address cost to collect so it's not going up, since that's 92% of our cost centers cost. So.
Anything you guys want to add about technology?
Well,
Real
we don't
AI.
have any real AI. We don't have any real AI.
I don't need
We
any
just
more
have
bots,
RPA.
people.
Right, we got lots of
Bot
bots.
it out. Real AI.
Right now, I could use a few bots too. I need somebody who knows Parathon who can write them for me.
Yeah.
And so I can have them do that, because when you do that, at least it takes away the repetitive stuff that your staff doesn't have to do anymore. And so like when you get a denial, I had one written for me, another facility, when we got a denial, it automatically went out, grabbed the ER record, put the appeal letter on it, went out to the site where the payer was, and uploaded it there. And so that I didn't have to have people do that anymore. And I still got all my money back because I already had my appeal, and it was timely because it happened within a day or two of the denial. And so that's the kind of technology we need that's going to actually do those things that keep people from having to do repetitive type things.
And one thing that reminds me, one thing I wanted to add to remind me of our conversation that we had earlier is identifying the top opportunity, because I think RPA and AI, they're all terms everybody's trying to use to sound cool. But really the biggest thing is what is the biggest opportunity? Ashley did an assessment, and 49 FTEs at Wellstar and under Ashley's team are working to status claims. So claim statusing 100% is a huge deal and a huge use case for Wellstar. So what can we do there? And that's a big opportunity for us. And it's going to be the top of mind thing for all of us too. So I wanted all of you to know that, to hit me up while we're having drinks. So let me know
Well,
if you can
while
help me
we,
address claim statusing.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Assuming half you guys figure out how to move all those response tasks into AI, how are you going to work to upskill your staff that may have been really doing that, the ones that will be into the next level so that they can continue to be successful? I know that
Yeah.
you're working towards that productivity.
No, it's a great point. So, Carrie, one thing that Ashley Hill did was she identified what work, actual buckets of work are revenue generating. So those things are like underpayment recoveries. And we know which functions need to be staffed, but we're waiting to kind of figure out how to free up these 49 FTEs so that we can then throw them into these revenue generating functions where we have the room for those, opportunities to then generate more net revenue improvement. And, one thing that we put in our monthly net revenue tracker, some things we talked about, what's the E&M impact? We do a whole policy impact, CMS policy impact to Wellstar. E&M conversion factor and sequestration, which that waiver ends December 31st. Yep. So in those net revenue impacts, we were able to also figure out the pockets where we can throw these employees, and we have a lot of room for that.
Believe me, we have a lot of room to put them where they can really be bringing in dollars rather than just doing this busy work. And Ashley, I have some open positions.
Hang on.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
We will be talking when this is over. 'Cause
Some
he
of
done-
those
he
people
done
already
built
left
Ashley
during the
up now.
COVID mandate. You can have the ones that left because of the COVID mandate. You can have those.
So
Have those.
just one more comment on the AI thing. The University of Mississippi RFP for is already out, and the number one, and there are several of you in the room who have responded to it, and of course you know I can't talk to you about it. So in any case, that is out, and the single thing that it is focused on is claim statusing. That is where your number one opportunity is, because you have people working that stuff, and it doesn't require people. And now I will not see that level of displacement that you all have mentioned. Could just be differences in geographics and things of that nature. But regardless of whether it's a large FTE change or a medium, or in my case, kind of a small, it's probably going to be about 15 people, because I got a lot of other people doing this stuff too. I already know exactly, just to support what they're saying, you know exactly where you can put those people, and you also have to be prepared. There may be some people who can't do that work. So start figuring that out, and think about, what other opportunities there might be for those folks, because not everybody can make a transition like that. But the AI thing is very important. There's nothing wrong with bot technology really, except that you have to adapt. Your IT has to adapt to it every time it changes. And AI just keeps learning and going on its way. You don't have to do all that IT background stuff. So I think we've handled that subject.
Yeah.
And she's getting job offers, so whatever.
So I would say to that, what do you do with those people in the meantime? I will say that Wellstar, since we bought the corporate HFMA membership enterprise, we have people now learning other things. So if you have them going to get a CRCR or going to get CHFP or whatever that may be, you're now encouraging them. So as we do move them, they've learned something different. So I think we were doing that at the same time to prepare for that. We also started a coding program, which everyone hopped on, which is fine, because we really want everyone to know coding. So now you have an opportunity to move them. I think we have to remember that in this day and time, it's not always everyone's going back to school. They're going to do other things, and we've got to be able to grab those other things, grab those things they learned, and say, okay, how can we use those people in other areas? So no, I'm not getting rid of the 49 people, maybe 3 of them, I don't know. But we're going to keep the rest of them.
Well, you do bring up a really important point, though. If you can concurrently be looking at how you're going to change and teaching people new skills. Now, you can't, in the coding shop that I happen to have in Jackson, you have to be certified. We had a number of people who were not certified when I first got there. They were given a year to become certified. Most of them have done that. They have met that obligation and are certified. But then you might be faced with some people who don't meet requirements for other things. So I really support the idea of a concurrent re-education or retraining, whatever you want to call it, retreading of people while you're looking at these new technologies, getting them ready, and letting them know the technology's coming. It's going to get out anyway. By the way, if you think that everybody doesn't know, they do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and they'll start worrying.
And I'm lucky enough to have 10 educators, 10 coding educators. And so they constantly train our physicians, they train our other coders. They help them to get additional certifications and things of that nature. So that is this is the first hospital I ever worked at that had 10 educators. So I'm really happy about that. And so they spend a lot of time training people and getting our coders additional certifications and making sure our physicians are always up to date. So when the new E&M came out, they came up with the training materials. They trained all the physicians on what they should expect, what they should do, all of those different things. And so that is really good. If you can build that kind of program, I would suggest you do it, because it is definitely something I would never give up.
It's a little easier to do in an academic medical center
it is.
or health system simply because education is such a fundamental part. No offense to any others, please don't misunderstand, but education is such a fundamental part of the culture.
Yes.
The first thing I want to say is, you're welcome, Sandra.
Did you could come back.
No.
My Lord,
What is happening?
leave my table alone.
I like this. She's shameless. I
She's
love
good.
it.
I am shameless.
I love it.
They are doing very well. There's a couple of them sitting right there.
In the era of, let's see, AI, analytics, physician burnout, and things of that nature. So I came from being a heads down coder to all the way to where I am now. So, one of the things that I've seen evolve over a period of time is it feels like everybody has gone away from the art of being a coder, right? So I want to know your opinions of coding being a lost art. Since you guys are from different organizations, and you seem like, I heard you say, which was music to my ears, Bill, that, hey, providers can learn their policies, and I've been hearing things like, no, we don't want to teach providers things like that, we want to be fair and run. So I wanted to know your opinion, yours and Dale's, and Adam, what do you think about coding being the lost art? Because for me, coming from an era of being a head down coder and when everything transitioned, I see that when we don't use coders where they used to be used while ago, you do get things that result in physician burnout. We're not utilizing our coders for things that they should be utilized. We're utilizing them more like claims, broker, denial type things
Yeah.
where they can
It's a
be
waste
that
of their
individual
skills.
to actually be that person who repetitiously, helps your provider and keep them in motion. And that's what we used to do 10, 15, 17 years ago. And we've gotten really away from that. And denials are increasing and all these types of things. So what is your opinion about that?
Do you want to speak to it first? Okay, I'll go first. I'm in pretty frequent conversations with departments, chairs, and people who work in departments who they really wish they had their coders back in their department. Oh, it would be so much better. And I'm like, we can't afford to do that stuff. This is a big enterprise. We have to have, first of all, coders want to work remotely. They can go elsewhere for more money.
Right.
Do you want good coders or do you have to own them in your department? Well, what we've done is I don't really care where a coder sits. A lot of them require working from home or they won't work for you. They'll work elsewhere. So the physicians have finally kind of accepted we can't just demand that coders work in our departments. Our coders who are on site and are happy to go sit in the department a day a week, 2 days a week, whatever, but I don't want them there permanently. And I'm going to get to your art of coding thing. But there's a lot of logistics around coding that have changed your field. The whole remote coder thing, these big coding companies out there who don't care where their coders live. Now, in the state of Mississippi, if that coder lives outside, not if they're an outsourced coder, but if an employed coder cannot live outside of the state at the University of Mississippi in Jackson, if it's an employed coder. So one of the things I have is a pretty big outsourced coding staff because I can't limit myself to the state of Mississippi on hired coders. So I think from an art of coding perspective, it used to be, especially in the physician medical practice world, the whole change of the environment of physicians joining big medical groups, becoming employed, the whole culture has transitioned, not just the art of the coder, would be my answer to you. Simply because they've just been caught up in a whole environment that's been shifting in a different direction. But they are vital, good coders. I hang on to them at all possible costs. I'm sure everybody on this panel does. You don't want to lose a good coder. But it is very important to understand that their field has given them a lot more independence, and we have to be respectful of that. So that's kind of what I see has happened.
Yeah, ours is a little bit different because we actually have a financial pod within each one of the services. And so we've got the people that do the coding, the people that do all the charging, the financial pieces of it is all built in, and it all belongs to us, even though they work for that particular specialty. And so it works very well.
That's great.
It's probably one of the best models I've seen. And so, like I said, I've got 2 coders in here. And so 2 of my coders are sitting here. And so they actually code for that particular pod. And so they are hands down coders. They still code for that pod, but they also do a couple of other things that they have to be responsible for. But they do the coding for that particular pod. And so they get very good at it because, they're doing it for that pod. And they have a career ladder. We have coder 1s, 2s, and 3s. So, and then once they get to a 3, they have the opportunity to go into management if they would like to do that too. And so I think most of the supervisors and even the managers were coders at one time. And they just now involved into the management ranks. And so that pod mechanism works very well. And so, and the physicians can feel like they're coders, but they really are part of a financial pod.
And do you have control over all of their employment stuff?
Yes.
So
Yes.
you hold them to
They are
revenue
part
cycle
of the
standards,
revenue
blah, blah, blah.
cycles. They are.
Excellent. Yeah, that's
So they're
that.
part
We
of
do
the
same
revenue
thing.
cycle, but they're within that pod, so the physicians and everybody else feel like they're part of them too, because they're working just for coding that particular specialty.
I wonder what the difference is in cost of the models. I bet that's what drove this organization to do it the way they
Yeah,
did it.
and then you have control over, and like I said, we have those educators, they constantly make sure they're trained on anything new that comes out, so we know that they're getting the consistent training that they need to have.
That's great.
Adam, you have any? Oh,
Yes.
you have a question?
A question for Sandra. So with your pods, are you able to say, when you're educating your coder population for that particular pod, hey, this is what's changing with these codes, this is what we need to do, and then physicians feel like they have that partnership, so that there's like, they have like go-to people, the
Yep.
same people all the time?
Yep.
Okay.
They do, they do. One of
And
my
what-
leaders of one of my pods is sitting right there. Shalon, didn't you want to say something about the pod?
Oh, hi.
Structure.
I ate dinner with her last
Yeah.
night. I like her.
Yeah, she's over one of my pods.
Oh, yay.
We got an open position, Shalon, then. Just move over to this table over here.
What's good for the goose?
They trying to get me back, see? They want me to have to fight up here. Go ahead, Jolanda.
And how do you guys manage any kind of rogue provider? You just sit them down and talk to them?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then if it don't work with me, I got some
You
people
got an
above me.
escalation
Yeah, I got an
policy, yeah.
escalation process.
Because I've seen doctors stand over a coder's shoulder and
Oh,
say,
yeah.
I don't
Oh.
care what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I want this.
That happens all the time.
And that, thank you, that, you got to have that escalation policy.
And we
so
do. We have an
that's great.
escalation process that we go through when they do that.
That's wonderful.
So in summary, all the staffing people, we need coders, like in summary, clearly. So another question, I know
Everybody
we're
move to that table.
running on time. What, and this is for
We
everyone.
told you we could talk
You
indefinitely
did,
about
you
everything.
absolutely did. What key performance metrics have you seen a decline in that is impacted by payer behaviors, and what would you desire from a vendor to help you with that problem?
Greater than 90 days. Because they take so long to fix whatever the problem is, when you find something that the payer's doing, your aging just keeps getting older and older and older while you're waiting.
And I want to chime in on that comment because that's mine too. It's aging, greater than 90 as well. And when you look at the payers, it's the ones you're seeing on Becker's and Modern Healthcare where they're Blue Cross Blue Shield and United Healthcare.
Yep.
Mindy called them out in the room next door. But those payers are the ones that are holding back money from providers. That literally is the headline when you look it up. And when we pull no response, back to no response claims, it tells a full story. It tells you the payers that are not paying on time, not paying the interest on time as well, based on the Georgia prompt pay law, But we need to get into more so than really a vendor, because it's all up to the payer at this point, but lawsuits.
Yeah.
I think that needs to increase. So I know Mindy has been working really hard. You'll see Mindy on the news. Kaiser lawsuit by Wellstar Health System, Mindy St. George. But in all honesty, Wellstar has done a really, really good job of standing up to the payers, which is why we're now out of network with another one. Mindy just causing a whole bunch of stuff. But long story short, I think we need to take action, and if it means getting together and banding up with all the local Georgia large health systems and fighting back, we need to fight.
That's the only way I think we're going to ever win this battle. And like I said, we just did a contract with the attorney firm because we're getting ready to start just suing everybody. Because we sit there and they know this is wrong, they know their system is messed up,
Yeah.
and then 7 months later, we still haven't reprocessed anything, we still haven't gotten a dime from it, and they're still, oh yeah, we're going to do that next week.
Well, and I might add that JOCs, the Joint Operating Committee that many of us run with payers, if they're not effective, you need to say so right on the call or at the meeting. You're not living up to your side of our agreement, because I think that's where a lot of this stuff starts. We're inclined to be collaborative with the payer, work on the JOC, bring these what we call large volume claim error problems to them. We've identified, we've all agreed it's on their end. I think one of their biggest problems, to tell you the truth, is they can't manage the integration of all they're picking up. They're picking up all these other insurance companies. They cannot integrate the claim systems. And everybody in this room that's a provider, we're paying the price for that. So I just call it out for what it is.
And Gail, I think the integration piece is what's also something that providers have to look out for on the underpayment side. Because of all these integrations and technical things that they're going through, they're also tying providers to the wrong fee schedules. Somehow it all ends up being the lower fee schedule.
Yeah.
Always.
And we're trying to fight Humana for over $500,000 worth of underpayments that should have been resolved last month, being 90 days old. And now they're telling us December, and then it's going to be the same thing next week, and then that's going to be 2022. So, yeah, that was me venting, sorry.
I think they expect us to vent. So
Yeah.
We're going to get together and get them.
So the reality is that if the JOC, we laid out some guidelines with ours that say, you know, these are going to be, we're running a joint operating committee, and under those circumstances, we don't have to have a formal charter, but we need to agree to some guidelines for what this JOC, how it's going to serve everybody's needs. And if a guideline gets compromised, we call it out in the meeting and say, you know, we'll be referring this to our attorneys. We'll be referring this to our attorneys if this isn't resolved within 30 days. And until you start talking about lawyers, they don't listen.
They don't listen.
And if anybody has recommendations for a successful Blue Cross Blue Shield HEART/escalation program, please let us know.
I think everybody's looking for that. Everybody's looking
Thank you for your feedback.
8,000-pound gorilla is scary.
This is treading on dangerous territory, but until providers start reporting payer issues to the regulatory authority, it will not change.
Yep.
That's true.
You go to PCH,
Yep.
all the Medicaid and state
Yep.
got to
Yep.
report to Department of Insurance for all of the HMO plans. And if it's something that falls under a PPO that's not governed, report it to the company that buys that insurance, ABC Distributing, whoever it is, send them a letter.
Well, and I know the insurance commissioner in the state of Georgia, at least years ago, one of the things that they used to be good at is running payer scorecards.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. If you don't have payer scorecards when you go into those JOC meetings,
Might as well
don't go.
forget it. Don't go.
Because one of the reasons they win is because we don't track our data. They know more than we do about us, and that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Know your own stuff before you get in the room with them. You know, and I think it's great. I took note of Sandra saying that they're actually putting into their contracts some of these requirements about timing of certain solutions and things of that sort. That's really important. And I don't know about anybody else, but is United gone crazy on medical records? Or
They've
is it
been that
just me?
way.
Just
No.
another delay.
Yeah, it's just another delay. It's
And
been like
now,
that for a while.
now they're sending this letter with a QR code on it, and if you don't send the letter back
Yeah.
with the records, they won't process it. And I'm like, it's your letter. Why do I have to send it back? It's your letter.
Yes.
So any questions out there for us?
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you notice in Veterans today, United Healthcare's profits are up
Yes.
7 billion?
United Healthcare.
We know why, because they got all our money.
Yeah, yeah. They do their quarter-end report. Well, guess whose money they're holding on
Right.
to?
Exactly.
I'd love to see their, what is it,
And now-
IBNR, or whatever the one is where they've got it, but they haven't paid it
Yeah,
yet.
but they haven't paid it, yeah.
Any other questions? All right, so we're at time, and I just want to thank Adam, Sandra, and Gail for your commentary today, your discussion, and hopefully you guys learned something.
Good job, Ashley.
Thank you.
You're welcome.